I spent more than half a decade working in China. In fact, I had 2 children born in Hong Kong. I've led Codels to China the last 3 years, just came back 3 weeks ago, in fact. I've had a chance to travel across the country. I've taken delegations to Urumqi and seen the prominent Uyghur Muslim population. I've visited Tibet with the group, seen the Buddhist monks. In fact, just recently, we were in Dandong, there on the Yalu River, in a part of China that doesn't get a lot of attention, visits, and to see what's going on, certainly on the North Korean border. It's critically important, I believe, that we as a nation that are founded on freedom and the rule of law are clear-eyed about the challenges and the opportunities that China brings, especially in its relationship with the United States. A relationship I see as perhaps the most important and consequential relationship between any 2 countries in the 21st century. Ms. Cook, in your testimony, you highlight the recent development where the Chinese government removed Bibles from e-commerce websites in China. I was very aware of that when that happened, saw that. And while the sale or distribution of Bibles has always been restricted in China, I think this serves as yet another example of the hollowness of the claims the government's making of respecting religious freedom. You indicate that the removal of President Xi's term limits and other actions have resulted in some levels of increased dissent. Have you seen any other similar responses to the removal of Bibles from e-commerce sites from the Christian community in China? And the second part of that question is, what are the prospects of this restriction might cause Chinese Christians who have otherwise been apolitical to become more engaged?
Thank you, Senator. I have to admit I haven't had an opportunity to look closely at the particular reaction to that beyond, I think, some of the comments by people in the United States who are in regular touch with Christians there. But another research report that I wrote that was published last year was actually about religious revival, repression, resistance in China. And in general, what we found across religious groups, including in the Christian community, that is precisely these kinds of actions by the government to believers, places of worship, and leaders of Christians who, don't necessarily belong to the underground church movement, but are, worshiping at or leading state approved churches, that does bring a backlash, that actually begins to blur the line more between the underground church movement and the state-sanctioned church movement. And one of the things that you see is that in general, as the Chinese government, in terms of various regulatory moves, squeezes the space for the spread of Christianity and other religions as well, more people seeking out alternative opportunities. So for example, with regards to leadership training, they limit the number of people who can go study at seminaries. So you have people actually studying through radio station opportunities based out of Hong Kong, through online courses. And so I think something like this restriction on being able to purchase Bibles may very well, though I haven't had a chance to see specific data, have the exact effect of this Instagram example from 2014, where a new academic study found that when there were protests happening in Hong Kong, the Chinese government blocked Instagram, and more people jumped the firewall to seek out information, to seek out the platform, and came across all kinds of other uncensored information. And my sense would be that, actually this can have a counterproductive effect for the Chinese government, because instead of Christians purchasing Bibles on the Alibaba platform and other e-commerce platforms that are above ground, now you'll have more people seeking out circumvention tools, seeking out other ways of obtaining Bibles that will encourage them to maybe look more broadly at other forms of information.
I think one of the other statistics that might be surprising to many in the United States is, if you look at the top 10 internet companies in the world, 5 of them are now Chinese. Look at the top 6 internet companies in the world, 3 of them are Chinese. The U.S. still is the number one. This is measured by revenues. But we've got Chinese internet companies now that are exceeding market caps of $500 billion. We've got Amazon, and Google, Alphabet, there's 1 and 2, but then you get to JD.com, Alibaba, Tencent, and it's, I think, pretty eye-opening. So when we see this censorship of Bibles in e-commerce, these aren't just small backwaters companies. These are huge, leading top 5 companies in the world as it relates to e-commerce.